This episode is made possible by Angel Studios. Go to angel.com/Miracle Files to show your support.
The spinning headlights vanished as the thundering force finally came to a stop somewhere out there in the darkness.
And we could hear the crash. So we started running.
They found Kali in a tiny pocket of space between the crushed sides of the back seat.
And it looked like the seatbelt was tangled around her neck. So Tony called 911 and they asked if anyone was hurt. He said possible fatalities. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to end up well.
This is the Miracle Files. I'm Emily Jones.
And I'm Holly Worthington. We're two sisters who love a captivating true story, but we're also seeking more light in our lives.
So we're on a mission to find and share unforgettable, uplifting stories of God's miracles. We hope you'll join us on this journey.
Welcome back to the Miracle Files. If you're new here, we are so glad you found us. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our miracles that come out on Mondays.
Yes, Miracle Mondays. And we are so glad to have you here.
Yes. And today's story came from one of you listeners, a young woman named Paige. And this is actually her cousin's story. Yeah. It's absolutely terrifying, but it's also so miraculous.
Yeah, this one is wild, but it's just one of those stories that makes you want to hold your loved ones a little tighter.
Yeah, I've been tracking my daughter's locations ever since I wrote this story up.
I do not blame you at all, but it's such an incredible story.
It really is. Okay, let's dive right in.
All right, let's do it. If you've never been to St. George, Utah, it's a unique place surrounded by the red cliffs of both Zion National Park and Snow Canyon State Park. Our story starts when Savanna Road relocated to St. George to join the women's wrestling team at Utah Tech University. She was still getting her footing on campus and in her new life when she got invited to a college party. There, she met a guy named Tony who asked her out, and she said yes. Though excited to go on a date, Savanna was cautious. She didn't know this guy well. As she waited to be picked up, Savanna glanced down at her newest pocket knife. She collected pocket knives, but this one was special. It had some interesting tools in it, such as a window breaker and a seatbelt cutter. Savanna decided to throw the pocket knife into her purse, just in case.
And this was one of my first dates since moving down here. And originally, our date was just going to be going to his house and watching a movie, something simple. So we were just going to wear pajamas. And so I was in strawberry slippers and I had like a hoodie on. And we were driving over to his house. He had come to pick me up. And he was like, hey, have you ever been to the lava tube? Sorry, this is so random. And I was like, no, I haven't. This is my first time being down here.
The lava tubes Tony was referring to were located in Snow Canyon State Park. These cave-like tunnels, formed anciently by molten lava flows, created hollow underground passageways. It was Savanna's first time in southern Utah, let alone the park. Tony insisted they had to go. It was late, but the spontaneity didn't feel dangerous, just random, just college life. So they turned toward the desert. The canyon was quiet when they arrived, the roads empty. The sun had been down for a while, and technically the park was almost closed. But they parked anyway and started walking the trail under the dark sky, just the glow of their phone flashlights guiding their way. Without thinking about it, Savanna had left her pocket knife behind in the car. The trail was uneven, strewn with volcanic rock and gravel. They hadn't gone far when they saw 3 other hikers.
We parked and we got out of the car and we started walking just up to the caves, and there were people coming down the trail and they were stopped and looking at something.
The small group's flashlights were pointed at the ground. They were talking, focused on something low and out of sight. Savanna stepped closer. She didn't know it yet, but what was on the ground in front of that flashlight, whatever had stalled these 3 people long enough to intersect their paths, would soon change everything. That same night, in St. George, Kali Parkinson was also settling into college life. It was homecoming week, and between classes and campus events, Kali had signed up to play in the Powder Puff football game. That evening was a blur of activity. football practice, a student event, and as night fell, a quick Walmart trip with some friends. As the group split up to head back home, Kali and her friend Haley ended up in a car with a guy they barely knew, a friend of a friend. This young man suggested the same detour Tony had suggested. Snow Canyon. Just a quick drive through, he said. Here's Kali.
We got in a car with him. I was in the back seat. She was in the front seat. And he was driving back and he started speeding.
Kali peered over the young man's shoulder. How fast was he going? She watched the speedometer climb higher and higher. Her anxiety grew as the car's engine roared. She asked the young man to slow down. Haley also asked him to slow down, but he didn't listen. The speedometer kept rising until it hit 113 miles per hour.
Me and the other girl were both yelling at him to slow down, to stop. It was so scary, and then I would say, slow down, you're going too fast, slow down, you're going too fast, and the other girl would say that too.
The lava rock and dark cliffs flashed by as they drove into the canyon. Kali felt a gut-wrenching mix of panic and helplessness as the speed continued to climb. Suddenly, the road twisted before them. The last thing Kali remembers is the fear rising in her chest and the car hurtling toward a curve it wouldn't make. In a moment of sheer terror, the car flew off the road and crashed into the lava rock. It then began rolling downhill over and over and over, 15 times to be exact. With each roll, the jagged rocks crushed the car like an aluminum can until it wasn't recognizable. And with each rotation, Kali's seatbelt wrapped around her neck, cutting off her airway. Just moments before, Savanna and Tony, on their date, had headed down the trail toward the lava tubes. They watched as the other people knelt and crouched, examining the ground. In the bright circle of their flashlight, something dark moved slowly, deliberately. Its long legs and hairy body finally came into view. It was a tarantula. Savanna pulled out her phone and started filming. Savanna and Tony introduced themselves to the strangers and gently touched the tarantula. Its fuzzy abdomen and wiry legs felt strange. The 5 young adults talked and laughed for a few minutes, enjoying this moment of fun and curiosity. Then it ended, abruptly, unexpectedly. In the distance, a low hum. It sounded like a car was coming, fast. Everyone turned to look as headlights flared across the ridgeline. But something was wrong. The headlights weren't facing forward.
So we looked and we saw it going down the canyon, and we saw it kind of, not the car itself, but the headlights shine at the sky and shine at the ground and kind of just stop shining at all.
A haunting sound echoed across the canyon. Tires skidding, glass shattering, metal scraping against rock. The spinning headlights vanished as the thundering force finally came to a stop, somewhere out there in the darkness. The group left the tarantula instantly and ran toward where the sound had come from.
And we could hear the crash, and so we were like, oh my gosh. So we started running towards where the crash was, but because I was in slippers, I was having a really hard time running. So I kind of was just stubbing my toe on rocks the whole time. So Tony got ahead of me, called 911. He came back and actually put me on his back and carried me over the rest of the way to the crash. I couldn't necessarily see it in the dark, but the closer I got, I could smell it, and I could see like dirt kind of floating in the air through my flashlight. And luckily the car landed up, but it was in pretty rough shape. So while Tony was on the line, they were kind of giving him instruction on what to do and what to look for. We couldn't see inside the car at first because the airbag curtain things were covering the windows, and they had him look inside of the car. So he kind of moved the curtain away on the passenger side and then immediately closed it and went and had to crouch down somewhere else. And I was like, oh no, it's probably gonna be bad. And they asked if anyone was hurt. He said possible fatalities. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is not gonna end up well.
Inside the car, Kali, the boy in the driver's seat, and Haley in the passenger seat were each crushed under crumpled metal and sitting motionless, Kali with her seatbelt wrapped tightly around her neck. Tony and Savanna knew instantly that the boy was no longer alive. They weren't sure about the 2 girls. The other small group of 3 went to Haley's side of the car and held her motionless hand. Tony and Savanna looked into the back of the car at Kali's pitiful situation. She was completely surrounded by crushed metal. It was impossible to get any of the 3 out of the car. Savanna looked again at the girl with the seatbelt around her neck. She looked lifeless, but Savanna couldn't just stand there. She had to do something, anything. And then it hit her. There was one thing she could do. Savanna took off running back to Tony's car, over sharp rock, clumsy slippers. There inside her bag was the pocket knife, the only one she owned with a seatbelt cutter. She stumbled back over the difficult terrain and reached through the broken glass.
So I cut her seatbelt and kind of unwrapped it around her neck. That's when she started to breathe and gain consciousness, and she started to cry. And I was like, "Hey, my name's Savanna, can you tell me your name?" And she told me her name is Kali. And I told her that the police were on their way and she would be okay.
The police and ambulance soon arrived on scene, and a life flight helicopter landed nearby. Meanwhile, first responders used the jaws of life to pry apart the mangled metal. They found Kali in a tiny pocket of space between the crushed sides of the back seat. They couldn't believe anyone could still be alive in there.
Hey guys, we have to just take a minute to tell you about this incredible show we've been watching called Miracle from Angel Studios.
Yes, Miracle is amazing. You're going to love it.
So good. I've been binge watching it with Blake, and every episode is about miracles that defy science and reason. And they even have a couple on the show who are scientists who study how prayer impacts medical outcomes. It's so fascinating.
So cool. I love it. And it's very faith promoting. It's so thought provoking. Mm-hmm. Plus, at the end of each episode, there's a song that's performed by popular Christian artists that just kind of perfectly wraps up the whole miracle.
Phil Wickham is one of my favorites.
Yes.
Yeah.
It gives me chills.
It gives me chills too. So don't miss out. Join the Angel Guild at angel.com/miracle files to stream Miracle, the new series from Angel Studios. Unlock all 8 episodes and be part of a movement celebrating faith and miracles.
That's angel.com/miracle files. Seriously, guys, go check it out. And thank you so much for supporting Angel Studios, whose partnership helps bring you this podcast.
And now back to our story.
5 hours away, Kali's mother, Kali Parkinson, had no way of knowing that her daughter was barely clinging to life. Shanda had just finished packing her suitcase. She was planning to head down to see Kali the next morning for family weekend at Utah Tech University.
I fell asleep peacefully, and my husband got a phone call. Apparently, the hospital had tried to call me first, and my phone was off for the night because I had fallen asleep. So then they left a message, and they called my husband, Tom. And so he picked it up, and it was a social worker from the hospital that told us our daughter had been in a car accident. So he immediately said, "Just a minute." And he came over and he sat on the bed next to me and he patted the bed and he said, "Honey, this is an emergency. I'm going to put this on speakerphone." And I hadn't been asleep more than 10 or 15 minutes. So I sat up in bed, and on speaker, this social worker talked to my husband and I and told us that she had been in a rollover car accident and that she was injured and was in a CAT scan, and that they'd call us back and tell us what was broken. I did not realize at this time she had been life flighted or what kind of situation it was.
Shanda and her husband got off the phone. They decided he would stay with their youngest son, while Shanda, along with their older 16-year-old son, would head to St. George. As Shanda drove through the night, the hours passed excruciatingly slowly. Fear clawed at her, yet unexpectedly, a quiet sense of peace burned in her chest. All she knew was she needed to get to her daughter, needed to help her, needed to be there for her in this terrible time. At last, she reached the hospital. When she saw her daughter, Kali looked so broken. Shanda hurried to her bedside and took her daughter's hand.
She was unconscious, and obviously in a lot of pain, lots of bruises, lots of cuts all over her arms, all over her legs. And then the story started unfolding of what had happened. I saw a picture of the car on the news and started really realizing the gravity of this.
A Utah Tech University student was killed in a crash overnight in Snow Canyon, and 2 others were hurt. Investigators say it appears their car was speeding when, for some reason, they rolled and fell 300 feet down a cliff. 1 man inside the car was killed, and 2 women were seriously hurt. Their conditions right now are unknown.
Within hours, Kali was rushed into surgery to have her shattered pelvis repaired.
They put 2 screws on each side and a plate across the back of her pelvis to fixate her pelvis and put it back together again. And they told me that she had a big cut on her head that they had stapled closed. And they said that she had some fluid in her abdomen and they weren't sure if it was internal bleeding or if it was just because of the pelvis. I didn't leave her side. We sat with her. She would wake up from time to time, very delirious, but very aware of who she was and that she'd been in an accident, and very worried about her friend Haley. Where's Haley? Where's Haley? And I'd say, Haley's in the room next door. And she would say, it was scary, Mom. It was scary. We were going so fast. I told him to stop. He wouldn't stop. And then she'd scream and then she'd fall back asleep. It was really hard. The next day, she started doing kind of okay. The physical therapist said, okay, with the pelvis, the thing you need to do is sit up in bed. They got her to sit up in bed and she screamed. She was in so much pain. And I held her hand and squeezed it. And they said, you just got to sit here for 10 minutes. And she sat there and you could just see the blood vessels in her head just wincing in pain.
Something was wrong. Kali's stomach became extremely distended. She was rushed back into surgery. The surgeon opened Kali's abdomen and found what no scan could show: a torn muscle wall, internal bleeding, a third of her colon dead, her pancreas leaking, her body moments away from shutting down completely. They had almost missed it. Fortunately, they didn't. Still, Kali's recovery was far from over. For Shanda, watching her daughter suffer was almost more than she could take. The only thing she could do was beg God to help her daughter.
We had a really rough night that brought me to my knees, and she would even look at me and say, Mom, I just don't know if I'm going to live. I don't want to live anymore. And I knew that was not the direction we wanted to go, and it took me right to my knees. In our church that we attend, she plays the piano. She's a really accomplished pianist, and she plays the organ and the piano for our congregation. And one of the songs that she plays often is a song that has some lyrics that say bruised, broken, torn for us on Calvary. And those words just rolled through my mind. I could just hear her playing the piano, and I could imagine what our Savior went through and the pain and suffering he went through, because here was my daughter, bruised, broken, torn, literally torn from a seatbelt. And I just got on my knees and prayed for his help. And I know everyone else was praying for us too. I was posting once a day to my friends and family, and we had hundreds of people following our story, praying for Kali. Hundreds and hundreds of people were out there praying for her.
Kali had to face yet another surgery, and her body was struggling to hold on.
She spiked a fever. She got really delirious. She was sweating. Her teeth were chattering from her fever, that it would cut her lips, and then it would make blood come down her lips and drip down her cheeks. And it was really scary.
But as the days passed, the prayers kept coming and coming. And while Kali experienced excruciating pain, once her fever passed, something miraculous happened. After a week in the hospital, Kali woke up, and remarkably, she couldn't remember the pain or the accident any longer. It was as if it had been washed clean from her memory. Kali had to learn to walk again, had to learn how to sit, how to eat. The doctors weren't sure if her brain would be okay. Then one day in rehab, Kali had a special request. She asked her occupational therapist if they had a piano she could use. The therapist nodded. Yes, they did.
And so we took her down to the piano, and she sat down and played Clair de Lune. And there were doctors and nurses that all came and were looking, and there was not a dry eye in there. And that's when I knew her memory is going to be okay. And she's going to get well enough that she's going to be okay.
Kali would heal. It would take time, but she would heal. Haley's injuries weren't quite as severe as Kali's, and Haley returned to college after just one semester. Kali took online classes while she recovered, but returned for fall semester of the next year. One of the hardest things for both girls was coming to terms with the loss of the boy who drove the car that night. They both forgive him. They know he would do things differently if he had to do it over. When asked if Kali had a message for his family, she said this.
Yeah, just probably that I'm not upset at him, that I forgive him and that mistakes can happen, and that me and the other girl are both doing okay, and that if they ever need anything, they can reach out to me, and that I am thinking about them a lot, and that I worry about his family, and they're in my thoughts and prayers a lot.
Savanna, the girl who cut the seatbelt from Kali's neck, later realized the young man who passed away had been in her English class and had sat at her table. She was heartbroken by his loss and wished she could have done more to save him. At the same time, Savanna is grateful she was there to help Kali and Haley and to be part of their miracle story. She sums it up this way.
Miracle number 1, Tony just randomly, while we're driving to his house to watch a movie, deciding he wanted to show me the lava tubes in Snow Canyon because he remembered I just have never been down here before. And we had talked about this later, and this was no significant place in his life is the lava tubes. He's never had cool experiences there. He just thought it might be something cool for me to see, even though it was at night and we couldn't even see much. Then the spider is definitely number 2. That could have changed so many things.
If the tarantula hadn't delayed both groups of young people, Savanna and Tony would have already been farther down the trail, oblivious to the bouncing headlights and screeching metal. The other 3, meanwhile, were heading back to their car when the tarantula crossed their path. Without that unexpected delay, they would have driven away before the accident happened. No one would have been there to witness the accident. Police later said that if the group of young people hadn't been on scene, what was ultimately one tragic loss could easily have turned into 3 dead bodies found in the morning.
Number 3, the seatbelt cutter. Absolutely.
How many young women do you know who carry a seatbelt cutter in their purse? To be in the middle of a desolate canyon at night and have a seatbelt cutter nearby, it's absolutely unbelievable. But it absolutely saved Kali's life.
Number 4, I didn't know this at the time, but talking to Kali later on, it sounds like they had a record-breaking life flight to the hospital, and the fact that the car landed on its wheels and not anywhere else, because that was so much easier to tend to them, and I don't think it would have ended as well as it did if it landed anywhere else.
If Kali had been hanging upside down by her seatbelt, it could have changed everything. Like each carefully placed note in a composer's masterpiece, each moment of this experience came together perfectly for these 2 girls to survive. It has been an emotional and physical journey for Kali. Her body is now full of pins and scars, but throughout Kali's journey, she has felt God with her. And if you see Kali today, you would never know of the nightmare she lived through. She now speaks to youth groups about her experience and has changed others' lives through her story.
I was a passenger in a car going 113 miles per hour that missed a turn and rolled 15 times over 300 feet. It was very, very hard, but I learned so much, and I don't wish that it would happen again, obviously, but I learned so much from it, and I think that miracles can happen so that the story can be shared too with others to help people learn from that lesson, or to help people know what to do in a certain situation, or know that God can be with them through a hard time or can do amazing things, and to help other people know that they can get through any hard trial and that God loves them no matter what.
Shanda thanks God every day that her daughter survived.
It's obvious that his hand was in this story, in miracles. It's obvious that he's there and that he's all powerful, that he can do anything. In this situation, he saved my girl. A miracle is something that shouldn't have happened, but did, or couldn't have happened, or that our minds can't wrap around. I think that's why miracles happen, is so that he can show us his love through his power.
There in the darkness, amidst red cliffs turned black by the moonless night, God's power shone through. The funny thing about stories like this is they don't always happen the way you might think they would. In this case, it came down to a tarantula, a spider that is actually seldom seen in Snow Canyon State Park, a pocket knife that most people would never have on hand, and 5 strangers who ran through lava rock to save the lives of 2 young women. It could have all ended very differently, but it didn't. Instead, it ended in a miracle.
Wow, this story had me in tears.
I know, me too.
And listen, I am not a fan of spiders. In fact, I hate spiders. Like, I don't even like to see pictures of spiders.
Me too.
They scare me really bad. But I guess we can give this one a pass.
I know. Who knew that it would be a spider who was a hero in the story? Like, plot twist.
Yes, this is just proof that God works in mysterious ways. And this whole story is such a miracle. If you see the picture of the car, you wouldn't even believe it was a car.
I know. It looks like this crumpled up ball of metal with just like 2 tiny little pockets. Like, it's unreal that anyone could survive that, let alone 2 girls. Mm-hmm. I actually just ran a half marathon through Snow Canyon State Park. And it was just crazy to see the lava rock and to imagine this car rolling over and over downhill on this lava rock. I mean,
I cannot imagine.
Gave me chills. It's crazy, yeah.
And you actually went into the lava tubes as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's not a super long trail, but once we got down into these underground caves and tunnels, I mean, it was so clear to me, there's no chance they would have heard anything above ground. Like, there's no way.
Yeah. The timing had to be absolutely perfect for this to work out the way it did. Yeah. So I guess thank you, Mr. Tarantula. As long as you stay 20 feet away from me, we're cool.
Yeah. And thank you, God.
Oh, yes.
God put that spider there.
Yeah. Most importantly, thank you, God. But I have to add, stories like this are complicated. It was hard to write because while 2 girls survived miraculously, there was someone who passed away. And our hearts and prayers truly go out to the family of the young man who passed away.
It is so tragic. He was so young. And I don't know, just think about who hasn't done something dumb or that they regret. When they're young, like, you just don't always think about the consequences or the risks. And I'm sure he was a good kid.
I did so many dumb things at that age.
I did too. Just a mistake.
And I know his family was praying for these girls. And I think it was a blessing, honestly, that even though they lost their son in this horrible accident, they didn't also have to bear the weight of him taking 2 lives with him. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they were praying for those girls. And we actually didn't speak with Haley, but she did give Kali her blessing to share this story with us. And I do think it is a miracle that Kali forgot a big part of what happened. I mean, it's amazing the coping mechanisms that God has given our body to just protect us from something so traumatic.
Yeah, she went through so much pain, it sounds like. Like, I'm glad she doesn't have to live with the memory of all of that. I do know that even with the memory loss, these girls will never be the same again.
No, none of them will ever be the same. In fact, just a little update for you. Savanna and Tony did not end up together.
I had to ask.
But they are still friends. And Savanna, really admires Tony. Here's what she had to say about Tony.
It was kind of an eye-opening experience for him where he realized life is short and he's capable of something great. And he's just one that wants to help people. So he joined the military.
Okay, so Tony ended up joining the military. And then we asked Savanna if this experience changed her life. And here's what she had to say.
Oh, yes. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about God. And I am looking at going to EMT and I applied for the fire academy as well as the police academy. This is something I also want to do and something I know I've been wanting to do, but I think this also helps me see that I am capable, and it's amazing to be able to go out and save lives.
Isn't that incredible?
I know.
In moments such as this, you can either fight or you can crumble. And I would probably crumble. But Savanna learned that she is a fighter, and she was calm, she was steady, she knew what to do, and she's going to make an amazing EMT.
I know, I agree. And it didn't just change Savanna and Tony. Kali also, after this happened, decided she wants to go into the medical field because she also wants to help people. She also wants to save lives. I'm like, from this one accident, how many lives will be helped and saved? You know,
it's incredible. It gives me chills just thinking about it.
I know, I agree. And before we end, just a fun little fact for you. If you're paying attention in this episode, you may have heard the song Claire de Lune that was actually played by Kali herself, which, how cool is that?
Yeah, she's amazing. And that was so touching to me. It made me tear up when I heard it. So if you listen back at all, knowing that, it makes it even more emotional.
I know. It's really sweet.
All right, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. And a huge thanks to Kali, Savanna, and Shanda, and Haley, and Tony, and everyone else involved for trusting us with this story. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. We will see you next time. Thank you for joining us. If you have a miracle to share, contact us at themiraclefiles.com or find us on Facebook.
We're now releasing multiple episodes each month, so subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for amazing video content as well.
Join us next time as we discover more of God's miracles. And don't forget to look for His light in your own lives.